The Real Investment Show.
So welcome back to the show this morning. Get ready to wrap things up. But two quick topics here. They actually kind of link with each other. A group of people are very upset with YouTube right now because their videos aren't being seen enough. And they are demanding that YouTube censor other videos because there's not enough watching of their own videos. And this is, of course, following the Global Fact 9 conference, which is, I didn't even know they had a fact-checking conference, but it's a fact-checking conference organized by the International Fact-Checking Network, IFCN. And as an international network of fact-checking organizations, they monitor how lies spread online. And every day we see that YouTube is one of the major conduits of online disinformation and misinformation worldwide. This is a significant concern among our global fact-checking community. This was, of course, what the IFCN previously wrote in a letter to YouTube. And during the conference, one of the speakers, who's the editor-in-chief of PolitiFact, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, complain that fact-checker groups are struggling because no one is interested in watching their content. Well, might be because when you do fact-checking, it's biased. You know, if you want to have a fact-checking organization, this is great. Check all facts for their, for their facts of what they are and not have a political bias to it. And this is, of course, the whole big problem why nobody watches it. There was a survey out this morning. In every country between the last 5 years, they went and surveyed, every major country. So the U.S., United Kingdom, Spain, France, etc. And they had a graph out this morning from Statista. And it says, do you watch news anymore? And this compared current rates to the number of people who have actively chosen to avoid news versus where they were, 5 years ago. And in almost every country, there were double-digit increases in terms of the number of people who are actively avoiding news. In the U.S., it's about 43% of people actively avoid the news because it's not news, right? We kind of have a joke here. We were running a show promo for the show talking about the comments we made previously is that, news is now more opinion. It's not news anymore. So CNN has decided that they're going to stop breaking the breaking news news icon, right? So because they used it on everything. But so it's kind of interesting that, it's interesting that people, particularly on YouTube and the other channel, people have more access today to voice their opinion by what they choose to view or where they shop, and of course we have rating agencies, all kinds of, all over the place from Yelp to others. You can leave a rating on everything now, right? You're on Facebook, you can rate the page you're looking at. You can rate the restaurant you go to. You can rate the car dealership that you shop at. You can rate everything, right? And so people have a very big voice today in what they choose to consume and how they choose to consume it. And so maybe rather than these fact-checking organizations being upset because nobody wants to watch their stuff, maybe they should start to think about, why does nobody want to watch my stuff? What is it that I'm doing that's not attracting followers, right? Why are people not interested in my content? And, that's, an issue to work with, right? It's just, this is, and that's really kind of the important thing to think about is, if your customer isn't, consuming your product, maybe it's a you thing, maybe it's not a them thing. I mean, doesn't really take rocket science to figure this stuff out. I said this kind of tied together because, part of these fact checkers have been on a rampage over the course of the last few years, in particular about green energy policies in America. And of course, now everybody's complaining about high oil and gas prices. And they go, well, how did we wind up with high oil and gas prices? How did this happen? Well, I can give you a few hints, right? But instead of me telling you what I think, I'm just going to read to you from an article that was out this morning talking about the problem with the current administration's green energy agenda because they modeled themselves after the Germany policy. And there's a really good lesson to learn by watching Germany. Now, the reason I say that is because my son lives in Germany, so he and I talk all the time about, kind of what's going on in life in Germany, and he's living there and kind of experiencing this all firsthand. 22 years ago, Germany stepped into the forefront of the green energy movement, implementing its program of subsidies for solar panels, wind turbines, etc. By the way, same thing the Biden administration did when he took office. The Biden administration, started providing heavy subsidies for wind and solar, suppressed industries that could reliably meet America's energy needs, like oil, gas, and coal, in order to reduce the carbon footprint. So in January, the administration announced it had pulled every lever to position America to scale up clean energy. The Biden-Harris administration readied offshore areas to harness the power from wind, approved new solar projects on public lands, and of course reduced drilling on public lands, and passed the bipartisan infrastructure law to build thousands of miles of transmission lines to deliver clean energy. So that was the tack that the administration took. Shut down the XL pipeline, reduced drilling on public lands, reduced permitting, slowed permitting down, and now everybody's complaining that oil companies aren't drilling enough, right? So this is how we get into this problem, is by doing stupid things. But 22 years ago, Germany had already started this process back in 2000. And then after the 2011 nuclear disaster, when the Fukushima nuclear plant, cratered because of the earthquake tsunami that really devastated Japan, shut down the Fukushima plant, caused all kinds of problems. Germany says, well, we don't want that nuclear fallout, so we'll shut down our nuclear program as well. So that has led to a big shortage of energy in Germany. In 2000, less than 7% of Germany's electricity came from so-called renewables. By 2021, that share exceeded 40% of the country's electricity generation and 20% of its total energy consumption, and also included electric vehicles. So all of a sudden, their dependency on this green energy, which is much less efficient, skyrocketed. By the end of 2021, before the Ukraine war, by the way, drove prices higher. German households, and I can tell you this for a fact, pay 32 cents per kilowatt hour for electricity. Now, how does that compare? Well, in France, which kept their nuclear industry intact, they pay about 23 cents. Average Americans pay about 11 cents per kilowatt hour because of our oil and gas, electricity, coal-generated electricity, nuclear-generated electricity here in the U.S. Much cheaper. That was then. If you haven't watched your electric bill lately, well, that's a different story now. 20% of Germans' electric bills went to a renewables surcharge to subsidize wind and solar. Now, this is the problem with all of these green energies, right? They don't work in terms of creating a profitable byproduct. They have to be subsidized heavily in order to make them work, because otherwise the cost of electricity, the production of that electricity is inefficient. So, in order to get that electricity to consumers at a reasonable rate, it has to be subsidized. And this is the problem. Germany spent heavily in increasing its renewable energy capacity, but in the case of wind and solar, capacity never delivered the promised output. Again, it's very inefficient. According to a 2020 report from the Institute for Electrical and Electronics Engineers, the IEEE, Germany's electricity output in 2000 was 54% of its total capacity, also known as the capacity factor. Unused capacity is the room from power grids, because the demand of electricity varies very significantly depending on the time of the season, kind of, et cetera. So that's where this comes out. By 2019, so just 19 years later, Germany's total capacity had risen dramatically thanks to sharp increases in renewables. Its capacity factor had fallen to just 20%, largely because wind and solar generators are what? Less productive than fossil fuels or nuclear. So total capacity factor for solar energy was just 10% because much of the country is often overcast. Wind energy is also producing well below capacity because wind turbines produce no energy on calm days and had to shut down on particularly gusty days to prevent turbine blades from being damaged. So in other words, as long as the sun's shining and the wind's blowing at just the right speed, you're good. Anything outside of that, it doesn't work. And what you need to have in terms of energy stability and energy security, which is a national security issue, is stability of energy production. And this is the one thing that kind of eludes people, that you've got to have the stability of energy production. There's a lot of alternatives to creating steady energy. If you want to create clean energy, nuclear, hydro generation, etc., are all much. I mean, rivers flow constantly, right? So you can build a dam and generate electricity on a very stable basis because of the flow of water. Offshore generation, because tides never stop regardless of what's going on. There's not an overcast day where tides stop. There's better choices, but the lessons that we are failing to learn is what is causing the problems that we have in energy prices, and that's not going to get better. It's going to continue to get worse as we continue to make these mistakes of chasing an inefficient form of clean energy. That also, by the way, requires an immense amount of oil-based products, petroleum-based products to manufacture to begin with. Wraps up the show for the day. Also, our latest article out on an earnings recession on the website now, realinvestmentadvice.com. Have a great day. See you back here tomorrow.
If I had a little money, it's a rich man's world. It's a